pleasure to introduce our third speaker to our Muscle Phys lecture, Dr. Ricardo Lima. He's coming from the University of Brasilia in Brazil. Dr. Lima got his undergraduate and master's degree in physical education, and he was applied most information to cardiology. From there, he went on to get his doctorate, his PhD, at the University of Maryland, and now he's conducting a year-long postdoc at the Stanford University in the medical center. He's about 7 months in with 5 months to go. From there, his research is looking at the physiology of exercise with abdominal aortic aneurysms. Kind of a mouthful. And also looking at data sets with the VET study, which is the Veterans Exercise Testing Study. And it's kind of a long perspective evaluation of veterans who come into the hospital for exercise testing for clinical reasons and are able to look at all their data. They have about over 10,000 participants in that particular study, with about 14 years median of vital status. They've been able to track them for about 14 years or so. That study's been going on since 1987, so it's actually quite a long prospective study. Other than abdominal aortic aneurysms, Dr. Lima does like to investigate genetics to exercise training, resistance training, aging, and he is an avid surfer. He hasn't been to Ocean Beach yet, but I believe it's in the works to bring him out here. So without further ado, we'll give him a nice warm San Francisco State welcome to Dr. Ricardo Lima.
Good afternoon. It's a big pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's actually a true honor to be talking in San Francisco State University. First of all, I'd just like to apologize for my English. As Taylor told, I'm not from here, I'm from Brazil, and yeah, but I hope that everybody will understand. And today we'll talk about sarcopenia. I don't know if everybody is familiar with it, but I hope that by the end of the talk, you'll be more familiar with this, and we're going to talk about some concepts, consequences, and the effects of resistance training. I know Taylor introduced myself, but I will be a little bit introduced further, just to have a better picture. So, I'm from South America, Brazil, and I was born in Salvador, which is in the northeast of Brazil. It's a very beautiful place. You can see nice pictures there. You're probably familiar also with capoeira, which is originally from Africa, and from there as well, and the Africa came there. And then I did my undergraduation in physical education there in Salvador, and then I moved to the capital city, which is Brasilia, and there I made my master's. This is the capital city. It's also a beautiful city, but there is no coast around, so that's a little bit disappointing in this regard. And that's where all the politicians work in Brazil. And there I made my master's in Universidade Católica de Brasilia, and also I did my PhD. During my PhD, I had a chance to live 6 months in Maryland with Stephen Roth, who works with genetics and exercise. He's one really well known in this area. I had a chance to work. I was lucky to have the chance to work with him. This was in 2008, 2009. And then I came back to Brasilia, and I got a position that I have until today in University of Brasilia, which is the Federal University in DC. Now I'm doing a postdoctoral training for 1 year. I'm for 7 months already, so I have 5 months more, and I'm working in a collaboration between Stanford University and the VA hospital, which Elizabeth is also doing some work there. And I work with Dr. Jonathan Myers, which is a very well-known reference in cardiopulmonary exercise tests and rehabilitation, and also with Dr. Froliker, who is a cardiologist, also really well-known. So, lucky to meet these people over my career. So today our goals will be to define sarcopenia, talk a little bit about its consequence and what causes sarcopenia, its etiology. And in a second moment, we're going to talk a little bit about the effects of physical activity, more specifically about resistance training and sarcopenia. So to start this, it's important to show how the physiological system behave over the whole life. And all of you know that as we grow and develop, our physiological system also increase in its capacity. We achieve a peak at some point around 30, 40, and then the trend is to decline. That's the general picture. And this figure also shows us that for sedentary people in all age, for example in the 60s, sedentary people in general, of course it's a textbook picture, it's a beautiful line, in real life it's not like that, you know this. So for a 60-year individual, physiological system, sedentary 60-year, it's below what is expected for an active person. So we begin to observe that physical activity has a positive impact in physiological system all over the life. And the muscular system is not different. With aging, many techniques, many studies, many authors shows that with increasing age there is a decrease in muscle mass, decrease in muscle volume. For example, if you observe a computer tomography from a young man compared to an older man, you can see that the muscle volume, cross-sectional area is reduced. And once we have reduction in muscle mass, and muscle mass is responsible for contraction, we also, with aging, there is also present a decrease in muscle strength, which can lead to some functional disabilities. And this process of loss of muscle strength and mass related to aging has been termed as sarcopenia, which is a term that comes from Greek, where sarx means flesh, and penia, poverty. So it cannot be translated so directly, but it's loss of tissue, of muscle tissue, that defines sarcopenia. And sarcopenia has been linked to multiple negative outcomes. These outcomes include a concomitant reduction in bone mineral density, impairment in performing activities of daily life, some issues with thermoregulation as well, some issues with glucose uptake, and in this regard, a higher chance to type 2 diabetes, and also some association with cardiopulmonary fitness, cardiorespiratory fitness. And altogether, sarcopenia increase frailty, reduce autonomy, and consequently increase healthcare costs related to aging, and this is expected to increase as the world is aging as well. And this has been reported, for example, in this article in the United States, that states that sarcopenia poses an economic problem for government. So it's being recognized that in fact sarcopenia has some impact in healthcare costs. And thus it's important to better understand and try to find some strategies to minimize this. What causes sarcopenia? What's the etiology of sarcopenia? You don't have only one factor that leads to sarcopenia, but it's multifactorial. What includes loss of motor units? That means that the nervous system also declines with age, and the muscle is activated by nervous system. And once you have aging nervous system, you also have a negative response in the muscle. So loss of motor units is one of the causes. Another interesting cause that I'll touch a little bit further during this talk is that besides loss of muscle volume, the quality of the muscle is also reduced. So that means that besides reduced muscle volume, this muscle volume has more conjunctive tissue that, of course, do not contract, and less contracted protein. And this has been made as muscle quality. So besides quantity, with age there is also a decrease in muscle quality. Of course, some nutritional aspects is also involved with the reduction in muscle mass. Once nutrition, there is a relationship with anabolic or catabolic status. The decrease in the release of anabolic hormones with aging, we know that is also responsible for a reduction in muscle mass. I will touch a little bit genetics. I had the chance to work with genetics. So, of course, there are some people that are more prone to lose muscle mass and strength, while others will relatively preserve this. And of course, the main focus of our talk is going to be the relationship between physical activity and sarcopenia. And more specific, like I said, we're going to talk more about a specific type of physical activity that is resistance training, some others call it strength training, weight training, but I'm sure most of you know what we are talking about. So this is a very interesting figure from the Baltimore longitudinal study of aging. I had the chance to collaborate a little bit with this study. It's in Maryland, and it's a big study of the aging process. And this is what we see in our testicles. This line represents muscle strength. Here's age. And what we observe, a decline in muscle strength with advancing age. But in real life, that's not the line. That's not the line. We have each of these points is one individual. So for example, if we remove this line and we observe this individual here, what's happening with this individual here? What's his age? Or here? No, it's his, because blue is men and yellow, green is women. So the first thing we observe is, in general, men have more or less strength than women. More or less in general. More or less? More. But of course, if you observe these women here, she's stronger than a lot of men. Huh? Okay, but if we analyze this man here, how old is he? More or less?
77.
Huh? 75? Okay. And his strength level, it's higher than all these 20 and 30 guys here. On the other hand, if we take a deeper look in this woman here, how old is she? 20. These grandmas here are much stronger than her. So the line says a general trend, but in real life we have different aspects that explain those. For example, this weightlifter here, I found this in the internet a couple of years ago, and coincidentally, he's a psychiatry, is that how I say this word? Here in California. And we see his age, some time ago, 63. Does he look for you a lot of decrease in muscle mass? Maybe not. But of course, when he be close to the 80s, he's gonna be much less muscle mass, right? No, not right. With 79, he's still with some muscle mass. So yeah, Ricardo told me that with age we have a decrease in muscle mass, but this guy is not following this trend. Of course, there's many other aspects that influence this relationship. And one of these aspects is exactly the genetics, the heritability of these phenotypes, these characteristics. And for example, the Medicine, Science, Sports and Exercise, which is a well-known journal here in the world actually, but it's an American journal. They use it to publish every year an update about genetics and exercise. In this update here, they call it the Human Gen Map for Performance and Health-Related Fitness Phenotypes. They provided an estimate of heritability for muscle strength, and you can see that it's a wide range, but in average, 55% of our muscle strength is due to genetic background. For muscle mass, a little bit even more. And for the age-related losses, it range from 25 for 35%. So it seems that heritability explains partially the reduction in muscle mass and strength. It's one of the factors that influence this. And then, to go a little bit deeper in this regard, the genetic variability since the 2000 with the Human Genome Project. In that time, scientists believe that they would find all the genetic variants associated with phenotypes. For example, what is the genetic variables associated with cancer? They imagine they would discover that. And once we have this discovered, with a simple blood sample, we can genotype and then detect in the, for example, in the age of 18, you are prone to have cancer, and then try to prevent this. That would be the purpose at that time. But the history was not exactly like that. So we have some examples. For example, the myostatin gene has been studied a lot in this regard, and a mutation in this gene. Myostatin is a catabolic agent. So if you don't have this catabolic agent, it's supposed that your muscle will increase more because you don't have this catabolic agent. And this happens with this dog. You can see those who has the myostatin genes in both chromosomes, they look thinner than those who have the myostatin gene in one chromosome but not in the other chromosome, which looks thinner in terms of muscle mass, not fat, than those who doesn't have at all in any of the chromosomes the myostatin gene. You can see that they have much more muscular in a dose response. And these are racing dogs, and these dogs here were much faster than these dogs here. They have more muscles and more speed. There's some mutations in calls that also myostatin genes, that also deletion of this gene generate these big guys here. These are also true in rats. You can see these rats here. This is the deletion myostatin. This is the wild type. You can see that this guy here is bigger when in this dissection here. You can also, with eyes, see the difference. And there is a report that was published in New England Journal of Medicine of the first human who was born, the first and unique, until up to today at least, as I know, the only human who was born with the deletion of this gene. And then you can check here, neonate state. You can see his vascular is very, how can I say, bigger than expected. With 7 months age, look at his legs, how strong was it. But that's the only case. So with this in mind, we try to genotype and identify these genetic variants, which are named as genetic polymorphism, and try to associate with muscle-related phenotypes. What would be muscle-related phenotypes? The two most studied is muscle strength and muscle mass. And then we have, it can come from blood, but even a mouthwash, we can have DNA sample and have his entire genome, especially today with the technology very fast. So the first paper I read in this regard was this one here, coincidentally again, from Dr. Roth from the University of Maryland. That was in 2004 published. And then I saw this paper, and then I want to do this one for my master. I want to try to replicate in Brasilia this very nice study that showed that one genotype is more risky to sarcopenia, more than 2 times risky than the other genotype. So let's say we identify, what's your name, sorry? Tom. We have a DNA sample from Tom, and we detect that Tom is 2 big Fs in both chromosomes. Had a higher chance to develop sarcopenia. So let's do some exercise, let's do some nutrition, let's do some environment changes to increase his chance. That's the goal of the genetic studies. And then I was very happy to do this study. And then when I had all the genotyping, all the muscle mass measurement, what did I see? That there is no association. And I was very sad with this because I thought, I will not publish this. This is a lack of association. But a couple months later, this paper came out, which is exactly this I'm talking about. And it's a pretty strong paper, Journal of Cardiovascular. It's a pretty strong paper. So what does it say? That and then what I want to tell you is that genetic studies in that time is really controversial. Some find association, some other don't find association. I studied a little bit further this during my PhD. Now I had the pleasure to have Dr. Roth with us in this paper. And we studied two well-studied papers, two well-studied genes in this regard, which is the ACE and the ACTN3 genes. And we observed that combining both genotypes, this is fat-free mass, a measure of muscle mass. In general, they had borderline but significant higher muscle mass than the other genotypes combined. A couple of years ago, we also had a paper coming out with the testosterone hormone receptor that we also found some association with muscle mass and strength in older people. But what's the current scenario in genetics and sarcopenia? The problem is that muscle mass strength is called, they are called complex phenotypes. What is complex phenotypes? It's phenotypes that is not influenced by only one factor. For example, Down syndrome, is that how we tell here? Down syndrome, it's only one mutation in chromosome. And it causes, this is not a complex phenotype. This is a monogenetic disease. But muscle mass strength is multifactorial. It's many genes and many environment aspects that influence on that. So what we have today is that many genes, they interact with each other, they interact with the environmental factors. What are the environmental factors? Do you do physical activity? Do you eat well? Do you sleep well? Are you stressed? All of these. Are you a smoker? All of these influence us. So it's a complex phenotype. So the picture today, unfortunately, is not so good to tell. This is the gene that influences muscle mass. The truth is we don't know exactly the genes that influence muscle mass in a very clinically relevant fashion. We know that irritability accounts for an important part, but we don't know the genes that explain this. So, based on that, I will agree with this pioneer geneticist that he says, we don't know, in most cases, how far social failure and success are due to heredity. I would say we don't know how far high muscle mass or low muscle mass is due to heredity. And how far environment. But, that's the most important, environment for sure is the easier to change. We cannot change our DNA, but we can change our environment. We can change how we exercise. If we exercise, we can change how we eat. We can change how we behave, of course. So now I will forget a little bit about genetics and I will move forward. Just repeating a little bit. The age is associated with reduction in muscle mass, and that muscle mass reduction is associated with a reduction in muscle strength. But this is not the only mechanism. What I want to say is that the reduction in muscle mass is not the one to explain, it's not the only one to explain reduction in muscle strength. We have several other aspects that is interesting to see. And we can see in this figure here, again from the Valentino longitudinal study of aging, that muscle strength reduces with aging, muscle strength also reduces with aging, but the reduction in muscle strength is higher or lower than the reduction in muscle mass? Higher. So it's not only this that is explained. There are other factors that explain this. And one of these factors I already mentioned to you, that is besides lower volume, there is more fat and conjunctive tissue in the muscle system. And this reduction in muscle quality also accounts for the reduction in muscle strength. So muscle quality has been measured as a simple ratio, which is the ratio between strength and muscle size. For example, if we measure knee extension strength and we have quadriceps, excuse me, quadriceps volume, and we have this ratio. We have the amount of strength per unit of muscle. For example, we can have two muscles, two different persons with the same amount of muscle, but one can generate more strength than the other. And based on this ratio, the one who has higher strength has a higher muscle volume. Of course, this is an indirect measure of muscle volume, but it has been well used in research settings. So let's see a little bit of the consequence of sarcopenia in our experience. We have body composition evaluated through DEXA, which provides fat-free mass, which is a measure of muscle mass, muscle volume. So based on this very fast, I know I came to your laboratory here. I know that you have no, it's not a DEXA here, it's a body pod, right, which is also very robust method. And based on the measurement of fat-free mass, we can define sarcopenia. There is no consensus for sarcopenia definition, but I'll touch how the current state of art is. So the DEXA provides the whole body fat-free mass that can also be divided in legs fat-free mass and arms fat-free mass and trunk fat-free mass. And the sum of arms and legs fat-free mass is named appendicular fat-free mass and has been used as a measure of sarcopenia. Specifically, Baumgartner in '98, he provided a cutoff value for sarcopenia. Similar to BMI, an appendicular fat-free mass divided by height squared lower than 7.26 for men and 5.45 for women. Those who are below this, they are classified as sarcopenic. So it's a definition only based in fat-free mass, not muscle strength. We also had muscle strength evaluation in this sample here. I just briefly show you. So here we evaluate knee extensor quadriceps muscle strength using an isokinetic dynamometer that I know you have a similar to this one here. This some time ago. You can see, of course. So we explain the procedure and we ask the volunteer to do 4 maximum contrast. We want to see the peak torque. The peak torque in general is in the second repetition. This repetition probably she reached the maximum peak torque, and this is a variable of muscle strength, quadriceps muscle strength. And what we observed with this data? We observed that fat-free mass and strength and sarcopenia, they are all related to bone mineral density. What suggests that individuals with lower muscle mass, with lower muscle strength, they are more prone to develop what? Osteoporosis as well. And the definition of sarcopenia according to Baumgartner also detect this. Those who were sarcopenic, in general, they had lower bone mineral density when compared to those who were non-sarcopenic. The same for cardiorespiratory fitness. We had a cardiopulmonary exercise test in those volunteers. We also had the measurement of fat-free mass and muscle strength. And what did we observe? Again, the sarcopenic individuals, in general, they have lower VO2 and time to exhaustion when compared to non-sarcopenic. And this was true for maximum capacity and also for the ventilatory thresholds, the first and second ventilatory thresholds, suggesting that sarcopenia is associated also with a lower cardiorespiratory fitness. So today, still today there is no consensus for sarcopenia definition, but the European group for this, they provide some interesting insights. They provide that not only muscle mass should be evaluated. So the studies we did, there's some limitation in this regard, and we know that. So to according to this new criteria, which is not that new, I think it's 2013 or something, the individual had to present low muscle mass is not sarcopenia, unless he also showed low muscle strength or low physical performance. So you can read this as low physical function as well. So if he has low muscle mass and one of these, and then it's sarcopenia, not only based in muscle mass. And also he provided 3 levels of sarcopenia. Low muscle mass, it's pre-sarcopenia. Low muscle mass and or low muscle strength or low muscle performance, sarcopenia, and severe sarcopenia it checks all the boxes. Low muscle mass, low muscle strength, and low muscle function. So these would be levels of sarcopenia. A very simple way to evaluate muscle strength is the hand grip strength. It's cost effective, it's not expensive, it's very fast, very easy to do, and it's a very strong predicting variable, hand grip strength. We made some association with quality of life. We evaluated quality of life of those volunteers through a questionnaire, and we observed that a simple measure of muscle strength was associated with quality of life. I showed you isokinetic, again, the hand grip strength, and we made some tests that mimetize activities of daily life. For example, the time up and go test, some of you are probably familiar, is just to stand from a chair, walk 3 meters, do the curve U-turn in the cone, and sit back in the seat. Of course, this test lowers the value, which is the time, better the function. Stand and sit, and also a 6-minute walking test. And what did we observe in this study here? That for both peak torque, the extension peak torque, and hand grip strength, all the variables were lower for those who had, all the functional variables were lower for those with lower muscle strength, both isokinetic and hand grip strength. What suggests that strength in the elderly is in fact associated with functional autonomy. We were also interested in the association between muscle strength and balance, because falls in the age in older people, it's a very important concern. Falls is one of the biggest concern in aged people, because in general they have lower bone mineral density, so falls is associated with hospitalization and with impaired function as well. So we had this strength test that I showed you. We made static balance in a forced platform. As much more movement here, less balance the person presents. So in general, muscle strength, both hand grip and some isokinetic variables were associated with the static balance. This is negative. Why is this negative? Because higher the strength, lower is the balance, the static balance. You cannot see, but the machine, the platform can see this. And more important than only the static balance is that all the muscle strength measurements, they were associated with the number of falls in the last 2 years. And again, it's negative. Higher strength, lower number of falls in the last 2 years. And that's very interesting because it probably has some clinical implications. And finally, as a consequence of sarcopenia, there is the literature suggests that low muscle mass and strength is association with inflammation. There's a state of inflammation that has been even named as inflammaging. I don't know if you've heard this before, but with aging there is a trend to inflammatory markers to be a little bit elevated. And in this study, basically we showed that here is interleukin 6, which is an inflammatory marker. And what we observed, that comparing, we we took those below average and above average. And below average is the black bar, above average is the white bar. What did you see? That those who had low inflammation, they are younger. They are all older, but compared to each other, they had lower age. They had lower waist circumference, which is also a very strong measurement, simple and have strong predicting ability. They have lower, and that's very significant, C-reactive protein, which is a very common in clinical practice. It's a measurement, it's a blood measurement of inflammation as well. And talking about muscle strength, they had lower muscle strength. That means that higher inflammatory markers were associated with lower muscle strength. And this is interesting. So I showed this paper for you. I told that sarcopenia has implication in healthcare costs, but this paper also says that this can be modifiable, and this is good news. And one of the way to try to modify this is through physical activity, and specifically, I realized that I still had some hair in the time. It's at least 10 years ago. Let me see. No sarcopenia. So among physical activity, resistance training, strength training is one of the type of physical activity that have been more studied in this regard. Of course, today we have functional training. We also have CrossFit, which is kind of very similarities. But in this study here, I mostly touching resistance training. So, at least in Brazil, in the past, resistance training was viewed as a practice for younger people who want to be stronger, want to be more muscle mass. But the picture today shows that resistance training has a lot of health-related improvements as well. And that's what I try to show you. This is a very classic study in resistance training in aging. And they had only 12 volunteers, 60 to 72, only 12 weeks of resistance training. And what did we see? That in only 12 weeks, look at the amount of muscle strength increase, both for the knee extensors and for the knee flexors. So there is no doubt. Resistance training increases muscle strength. There is no question about this. In the 80s, however, what are the mechanisms that explain muscle strength increase as a result of training? In general, there are two explanations. One is they call it neuroadaptations. This very basically is to learn how to do. So in the first weeks of training, you increase your strength, but you don't increase your mass. How does it work? You learn how to do the movement. You learn how to recruit the correct muscle fibers to do the movement, and then you have an increase in strength. So this is one of the mechanisms. And the other one, which take part, not in the very beginning, but over some time, is the hypertrophy, the increase in muscle mass. So both contributes to the increase in muscle strength. So in the 80s, these outer years, they measured body composition through skin folds, which we know is not so sensitive. And they told, yes, older people, they have increase in muscle strength, but they don't show increase in muscle mass. Their increase in muscle strength are entirely explained by neuroadaptation. And this was kind of true over some time, but today, with more sensitive techniques, we know that older people can even respond with some muscle mass increase as a result of resistance training. And we did, when we studied in this regard, a very basic resistance training program. We were talking in lunchtime that sometimes there is some news in physical activity that everybody knows that's the best physical activity practice. But we did a very basic exercise with hip abduction, seated chest press, is that right? Chest press, toe raises, knee extension, pull over, leg press, knee flexion, and shoulder abduction. Over 24 weeks. How did we prescribe this? Based on one maximum repetition. We did one maximum repetition, and we took a percentage of this. In the first 4 weeks, 3 sets of 12 repetitions on 6% of one repetition. Every month, we measured one repetition. From week 5 to 8, 3 sets. We reduced the repetitions, but we increased the load, now 7%. And over the remaining weeks, which was the most part of the study, we did 3 sets of 8 repetitions at 80% of one maximum repetition. What did we find? Of course, all of them had a physician evaluation before going to training, just to make sure they don't have any problem that could be aggravated with the protocol. This is just some pictures. This is a stroke woman, all the plates plus some dumbbells here to evaluate by the end of the program one maximum repetition. This picture you saw. And then we have this published a couple of years ago. And we observed that, in fact, the resistance training group, but not the control group, they increased both isokinetic strength and significantly also fat-free meds evaluated by DEXA. So not only this study, but other studies show this, that yes, other people can benefit with increases in muscle strength and also with increase in muscle mass. Of course, the increases in muscle strength, they are higher than the increases in muscle mass. Not only for these people, but even for younger people. Another aspect that we have interest, just a secondary analysis that we did is, yeah, we know that muscle strength increase, but the literature, you observe increase of 100%, you observe increase of 15%. What explains this? Many factors. One of those is the way how we evaluated muscle strength. For example, we compared over this program evaluation pre and post through one maximum repetition for the extension and isokinetic peak torque. Which one do you think you're gonna show a higher improvement? Anyone wanna try? No one? When evaluated through one maximum repetition, an increase of 54% in average. When evaluated through isokinetic, 15 to 16% increase. So a much greater increase through one maximum repetition, because it's a little bit subjective. You put the weight there. Even if you don't show to the volunteer, you can have the chance. Should he have done a second, or we don't know. In the isokinetic, we don't have this. Pushes, you go straight to the machine. And the other aspect is they trained over 6 months almost in the knee extension machine. They only saw the isokinetic 6 months ago. So the specific of training can also explain a little bit of these discrepancies there. We also did a cardiopulmonary exercise before the test, the 6 months of training, and we evaluated them, and we observed that the resistance training program a typical one to improve peak VO2? No, but in these people here, it might increase a little bit, because the limitation during a cardiopulmonary exercise test would be peripheral and not central. Sometimes the heart is well to go a little bit further, but the muscles cannot go further. And we observed some evidence in this regard, in which the control group didn't change, but the training group improved. Time to exhaustion improved. Peak VO2, both maximum and at ventilatory threshold, and this was significant. So it was a positive effect of resistance training. We also know that aging, now not looking for muscle-related adaptation, but a little bit of cardiovascular adaptation as well. This problem, we know that with aging we have a higher prevalence of hypertension, so we know that physical activity can reduce resting values of blood pressure, and some evidence show also that resistance training can also reduce resting blood pressure. And we corroborated this evidence showing that the 3 months of resistance training reduced mean blood pressure, systolic blood pressure, and resting double product, which is the product by resting heart rate by resting systolic blood pressure, which is a good effect of resistance training. This is a second project in the institution I'm working in Brazil. Not the previous one was the one that I made my master's and PhD. This is the one that I'm working. Actually, that I work when I will be back to Brazil. Now I work at the VA in Stanford. This is just the group that we had there. In this one, we had some difference in the training protocol. It was only 12 weeks. The exercise were pretty much the same, but the way how we prescribed was a little bit different because we prescribed based on the volunteers' percent exertion. Why did we do that? Because does someone here go to do resistance training? Does everybody here have done 1 maximum repetition? But not everybody who goes to the gym do 1 maximum repetition, right? Actually, at least in Brazil, most of people who goes to the gym, they never did 1 maximum repetition. And it's not so practical to do. There are some limitations. So we try to have a more practical approach in this one here. So what did we do? In the first month, we did it. We asked them, we were closely looking at them, and we asked them to do number 6 in the Omni resistance exercise scale, which is the Omni RES. So the first month, somewhat hard. Second month, we increased to number, they in general pointed to 7 after each set, and by the last month, hard. What did we see in this program there? We did the functional test before and after the intervention, and we observed that time up and go. Here's in Portuguese, sorry for that. I forgot to translate this table here. So here's the sit and raise, the number of sit and raise in 30 seconds, and it improved significantly. And the 6-minute walking test also improved significantly, suggesting that resistance training might be able to improve ability to perform activities of daily life. We also, they also provide some blood samples for biochemical analysis before and after the intervention. Actually, for this one, we had blood sample 3 months before, baseline, and 3 months after. And what did we observe in this paper here was that all the variables were pretty stable, 3 months pre and baseline. They didn't change significantly, but some of them changed from baseline to after training. For example, total cholesterol reduced significantly, LDL cholesterol reduced significantly, triglycerides low, but fasting glucose reduced, and also fasting insulin, what suggests a positive cardiometabolic effect from resistance training in this population there. And also, I'm almost finishing here, we talked a lot about increases in muscle strength as a result of increase in muscle strength as a result of resistance training, but we didn't talk too much in improvement in muscle power, which is the ability to perform strength, but also with speed. So in isokinetic, we have the rate of force development, which is a measure of power. For example, here, in 50 milliseconds, in the beginning, before intervention, they achieved this amount of strength here, but after the intervention, the same time frame, they achieve a much more higher strength. And this is a measurement of power. In this regard, I have a colleague in my institution that I should have brought this paper to here, but I didn't. Which he compared with his research group the same protocol, the same training protocol. The only difference was one group performed in a slow pace, the resistance training, and the other group performed in a higher pace. Only in the concentric phase, not in the eccentric phase. The concentric phase was higher for one group. And please, was not like an athlete that do. The other people are not doing like that, but they're only doing faster the concentric phase of the exercise. And what did he observe? That both training protocols induced positive functional effects, but those who exercise at a higher speed, which is not the higher speed of an athlete, of course, they improved better than the other group. So this is interesting because sometimes when you think in another people in a resistance training room, we might know go slowly, yes, slowly. Not exactly like you can go a little bit faster, of course, not like an athlete. I don't want to be in the extremes right now. I'm not so slow, but not because when I'm teaching Brazil, I'm a little bit afraid of saying this because I'm afraid that you go to the gym and see the age to the people to be running very fast. It's not this. It's only to do the concentric phase a little bit faster. And one final study that we are still finished the writing process is just we only evaluated pretty much the same exercise, and then we evaluated the blood pressure response to mental stress before a training session and after a training session. We know that mental stress is something that increases the blood pressure. We know this. And we know that aerobic exercise, if you do aerobic exercise and you face a mental stress, and mental stress is pretty common in our daily lives. Okay. Even teaching is a stress here. Of course, my blood pressure is not in resting values here. I'm a little bit nervous. I don't know. I'm walking. I want everybody to understand my take-home message here. So my blood pressure is higher than in resting values. Unfortunately, today I didn't exercise before coming here. So if I had exercise, it was expected to increase blood pressure, but to a lower degree. And that's what we observed here. Here we have mental stress induced here. We made a resistance exercise session in this other woman. I know someone is going to ask me, why do you only study women? I will be happy to answer this question later. And 1 hour after, we induced again the mental stress. And what did we observe? This is just, unfortunately it's in Portuguese, but maybe some of you is familiar with the Stroop color test. I cannot provide you because in Portuguese you will not understand what is written. You will not be stressed, of course. But they were stressed. And the blood pressure increased. But increased lower. I will just pay attention to this right figure here. Here is before exercise, increased blood pressure? Yes. After exercise, increased blood pressure? Yes. But increase to a lower degree. So let's say, I don't know if I can say this, but it's a kind of protection about regarding stressful situation, which again we face every day in our lives. So based on this, I'll do just the take-home message here right now. It's a summary of what we talked up to now. And it is, sarcopenia is an age-related process that is associated with reduced functional capacity, autonomy, falls, and metabolic issues among older people. Resistance training has been consistently demonstrated to improve sarcopenia-related phenotypes and its related complications, especially muscle mass and muscle strength and function. And based on that, we can suggest that resistance training should be considered when designing physical activity programs for older people. And with this, I'm not saying that resistance training is the best type of activity for these people. I'm just saying that it provides some positive effects, and based on that, it can be considered when designing a global physical activity program for older people. Well, I'd like to thank San Francisco State University, especially for Taylor and Dave, who provided me all the support since I arrived here in a very nice meeting before. Especially for Jimmy, who I was lucky to, I don't know why I had this idea with Baru in that time. Let's go know some institution around here, and we are lucky to find Jimmy, and hopefully we're gonna do some research collaboration from now on. I'd like to acknowledge my scholarship. I'm living here, Bay Area is not that cheap, you know, and I have a scholarship that helps me to survive around here. And I'd like to thank Dr. Jonathan Myers, which is my mentor in BA, Dr. Victor Froliker, who is also work with collaboration. I'd like to acknowledge Baru, which was, he's from Israel. Maybe you saw probably his talk a couple weeks ago here, and he's a very nice guy. He was a postdoc. The same situation I am now. I was lucky also he was 6 months in advance. So every difficulty he had in the beginning, he showed me the way to do. So I didn't have the same difficulties. I was lucky in this regard. And thank you for the whole VA team. Him, you, Julia, Gazem, some of them are here, but it's a very nice team, both in research and as human. And I'd like to of course, to thank my team in Brazil, my students. Without them, I couldn't do any research. The volunteers who volunteer for this study. I'd like to leave my emails here. If you have, I know you'll probably have some minutes to question, but if you have further questions, if you want to go to Brazil and visit my institution, if you want to go to Stanford or VA. And thank you very much for this.